Well, who was Jesus? Or maybe the question could be put like this: what is Jesus? The New Testament tells us that Jesus of Nazareth taught crowds of thousands with a kind of authority that Jewish people of his day had never heard before. He healed the lame, he healed the blind, he healed those with leprosy. He drove out demons from those who had been living under that oppression for years. Jesus fed thousands with only several fish and a few loaves of bread. He even raised the dead. So after seeing Jesus in action for a year or so, the question on the disciples' minds and other people's minds was, who is this man? Or maybe even, what is this man? Well, here's an example from Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27, of the growing realization that Jesus was not just an intriguing teacher, much like others in history. Then Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him, and suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Well, in a moment, I'll take you to the top of Mount Arbel on the west shore of the Sea of Galilee. You may have a little trouble hearing every word I say in that brief video clip because the wind was so strong and cold that day. Those winds drove home to me how a sudden storm could come up on the Sea of Galilee, like the one that Matthew records. The Sea of Galilee is like a bowl with mountains all around, and the air currents often sweep down those mountain slopes with such force that a calm day on the water could easily turn nasty in a few moments. Well, Jesus took advantage of the situation that they found themselves in to demonstrate his supernatural power over nature. But in some ways, Jesus was also very human. To look at him, Jesus could seem so much like anyone else. I mean, he got tired and he slept. He got hungry and he ate. He was thirsty and he drank. He could even be moved to tears, as in John 11 at the death of his friend Lazarus. He could get angry, as when he upset the tables of the moneychangers. He could feel vulnerable. Think of his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. But then on the other hand, he seemed to know people's thoughts, at least at times. And he did all those amazing miracles. So it's no surprise that even those closest to him were confused. Who is this guy? What is this guy? Well, maybe it was for this reason that Jesus took his disciples away alone, away from the demands of the crowds. Maybe Jesus wanted specifically to bring the issue of his identity to the forefront of their thinking. So Jesus took the disciples on a sort of leadership retreat. The setting of the retreat was Caesarea Philippi, which is amazing in itself since it was the site of one of the largest pagan shrines in the whole region. Jesus took his disciples to a pagan shrine that claimed to contain the gates of Hades, the gates of death. In our times, that would be a little bit like holding a convention of Bible school students in Las Vegas or someplace like that. There at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus posed this crucial question: who do people say that I am? And here's what Matthew tells us about the incident in Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. So at Caesarea Philippi, Peter at least finally got it. Maybe it took getting completely out of Jewish-influenced territory to see Jesus as he actually was. Amid the pagan shrines and the creepy claims of being the gates to the underworld, maybe then it suddenly became obvious that Jesus is the Son of God who entered the human race to redeem us all. After this episode, the disciples would continue to have their doubts about Jesus, that is until after his resurrection. But here they began to see Jesus for who and what he truly is. So may I invite you to do the same. Sometimes in our everyday lives, we miss seeing Jesus. I mean, really seeing him. And that's why in unusual circumstances like a life change or an illness, the death of a loved one, some kind of personal crisis, people sometimes can see Jesus in ways they couldn't see him before. But you don't have to wait for a crisis in your life. Put your trust in Jesus now, this one who raises people from the dead and who rose from the dead himself. And I guarantee you'll find a new life for yourself when you see Jesus in this new way. So, come along with us to Mount Arbel and Caesarea Philippi. Behind me is the Sea of Galilee, and you can see behind me it's like a great big soup bowl out there. No wonder the winds could come so strongly in here. It's like the winds just go right down that hill and onto that lake and make big storms once in a while. What a great panoramic view of Galilee and the Sea of Galilee up here. This is the place where God sent his Son. This is the place where God was incarnate among us. What a wonderful reminder, that God actually came to this very earth, walked these very stones in some way or other, just so he could redeem us and make us children of God by faith. We're at Caesarea Philippi. This is the place where Jesus asked his disciples the question, who do people say that I am? Who do you think that I am? This is the place where Peter said, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Pagans at this time thought that cave back there might actually be associated with the gates of the underworld, or Hades. We find that Jesus was right. He established his church in this place, and it stands to this day. Behind me you can see several niches in the rock here at Caesarea Philippi. These niches have to do with different pagan shrines that were built here. And it's interesting that Jesus chose this place to say that he would build his church. And we find today in the 21st century that the Christian church is very much alive and well, and these pagan religions are very much a thing of the past. Caesarea Philippi here in the north part of Israel is considered a garden spot and has been for centuries. I was standing here beside this stream which comes out of the mountainside. It's really a spring-fed stream, and you can see how beautiful it is and how it has waterfalls with vegetation around it. Reminds me of how Psalm 1 talks about a person who is righteous is like a tree planted by the rivers of water, bringing forth fruit in the proper season. That's an incredibly good promise for us as we think about our lives, that there's a season for things and there's a proper season for bearing certain kinds of fruit. But you have to be planted by the rivers of water. You have to be close to the source of where good things come from, which of course is God. And water oftentimes symbolizes God's blessing in our lives. So it's a good thought to remain close to God's blessing, to remain available and near God so that he can bless us and we can bring forth the fruit and enjoy the fruit that we need to enjoy and bear in the proper season. So here we are in Israel, Caesarea Philippi. Perhaps another lesson we can gain from this place. Hi, this is Mike Bogart with Aspect Ministries. If you like this video, like and subscribe to our YouTube video channel, Aspect Ministries, and check out our website, aspectministries.com. There's a wealth of material that promotes effective 21st century faith, aspectministries.com.